Guess what, nerds? It's not a video on Tombs of a Mascot. Well, it kind of is, because I think that TOA is a large factor in what is happening right now, which is wide-scale RuneScape burnout. And it's not even something that I'm experiencing myself to a massive degree. I am very slightly bored of the game currently, and I think it's important that I'm honest about that with myself, but it seems like everybody is turbo burnt right now. Just take a look at this message that I sent to my friend, trying to think of the title for this video. Exactly. And I know I said that this video is not about TOA, but that was mostly a lie. I think it's a pretty direct result of not only the way that TOA is designed, but several other pieces of content in the game. And this is not going to be a giant criticism of TOA. I actually really like TOA, but maybe that'll be another video or just never at all, because I'm really tired of covering TOA at this point. This is, however, going to be an aggregate of all of the things creators and players alike are feeling. Real quick, saving the day again is HelloFresh. HelloFresh is one of my favorite companies to work with. They are a premium meal kit company that delivers fresh ingredients from the farm to your door in under a week. Now, the best thing about HelloFresh, hands down, is just how good it tastes. Every single recipe that I have tried has been delicious, and there are a million of them. It really does make such a big difference when you cook real food yourself rather than, order out or make some microwave fluff. And that was another thing that was huge for me about HelloFresh, and why I continue to use them. I was shocked when I checked my credit card statement and saw how much I spent on deliveries and takeout. HelloFresh is up to 72% cheaper than dining out. It saved me a ton of money, and it can save you a bunch as well. Last but not least is how easily it helps me stick to my nutrition goals. I just pick the meals that fit my needs, whether that's currently weight loss for me, down 5 pounds by the way, let's go, or bulking up for the winter. You don't have to worry about going to the grocery store and curating every single item you buy. HelloFresh does that for you. So, massive thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Use my link or go to hellofresh.com and use the code POGTASTYOCT65 for 65% off. Plus free shipping on your first box. Once you click my link, my description will live update to count up the purchases. Back to the video. Now, I'm only really presenting anecdotal evidence right now, so let's take a look at a couple numbers. And I don't think these numbers are bad. They're actually totally fine. RuneScape is nowhere near, dying. We're not a dying game. But it is a good reference to see where RuneScape sits in its historical context. Now, currently at peak play times, we sit just under 90,000 players. The average is of course a lot lower, but I'm just going by peak to demonstrate how many players can play the game. Now, when mobile came out, we hit 150,000. When COVID was in full swing, 172. During leagues, 130. Next release, 140. The Raids 3 peak, however, is just over 100,000. It stayed there for about a month as well, but it's slightly gone back down to around 90 at this point. Now, why? Well, there are a few reasons. Granted, it is quarter 3, which is historically a very slow quarter, both in gaming, media, content in general, but I think it goes beyond. Now, I think the main question that we need to ask ourselves is, why is Tombs of a Mascot not scratching the itch? And I hate that I'm about to say this, I apologize, but I don't think it's hard enough. And before you get your little angry fingers, onto your keyboard, let me clarify. I don't think it's difficult in the right way. Now, I talked about this in my last video a little bit. Number one, the scaling just does not favor harder difficulties. You can get to the low 300s in raid level, and all you're going to be adding are invocations that give you new and interesting mechanics to interact with. However, once you run out of those invocations, you'll have to start adding invocations that just make the HP of bosses higher, they'll limit or they'll drain your supplies, and they'll just make you take unavoidable chip damage. But at that point, the raid scaling is so high that all these mechanics are just brutal. You're not doing anything more fun, right? The difficulty is now based around supply management, making sure you make 0 mistakes, which, don't get me wrong, is absolutely difficult, sure, but I think most people would agree that it's just the least fun way to make content difficult. But this raid is, fantastic for the 200 to 300 invocation range, right? It's great for mid-game or even early late game players. But the depth and the longevity of the content for the sweatiest of players, and I mean the peak sweats, is key, is absolutely paramount in preventing burnout for everybody. It might sound weird, but hear me out. Now, if even the best players are still learning new methods and strategies, then that means newer players will always have something that they can aspire to, that they can learn. And with this content, it seems to be currently lacking a little bit in that regard. Now, the second thing turning people off of TOA is, I think, the general pacing of the content. And in my opinion, the puzzles are to blame. They were designed to be kind of quick and fun and engaging, and they aren't particularly. They're nowhere near as engaging as, real combat is. They lack the rhythm, they lack the flow, they lack the depth that is the hallmark of a lot of high-end RuneScape content. They're not bad at all, but they're not satisfying. Like, you kind of get the feeling that it's like, we gotta do this before we go do the real boss, Now, the light puzzle, fine. Croc puzzle, fine. Kefri puzzle is a little bit tedious, and especially with the just brain-dead, solve plugin that we have nowadays, it just feels like a tremendous waste of time. But the worst offender by far is the fucking monkey room. It takes as long as all 3 of the other puzzles combined. The room is just too big. It feels kind of like a disorganized and thoughtless Nilokiss room. And don't even get me started on the stupid acid monkeys that hug the pillar in the middle and they LOS you and pull you into their poison trails. It's just It's not one big thing that's bad, it's a bunch of little annoying things that add together to make this one annoying thing, which is the whole room. Now, the Nilokiss room is actually cool because you get one specific role. You know exactly how the spawns are going to be working out. There is a deep logical process for every little micro efficiency that you can make. And it just feels really rewarding to learn as much as possible about the room. The monkey room is just super flat by comparison. And that depth that I'm talking about, the Nyla room, is exactly what is necessary to keep people engaged. And as a result, unburned. See, when TOA came out, everybody grinded it for like a month, right? Expected, because it is new content, obviously. But then we kind of saw this huge drop off. After like 3 weeks maybe, everyone just started going back to TOB. And that, I think, is due to a few design decisions that we will get into in a little bit. But this is just further evidence that TOA is not engaging players in the correct way. At least for true longevity. Like I said, I do like the raid. I think it's fun. Now, I know there are debates with like the rewards and stuff as well, but for now I'm just gonna focus on gameplay design. Now, as a generality, I think that the best pieces of content tend to be simple. Take the Inferno. You probably think it's crazy that I just called the Inferno simple. I'm not saying it's easy, it's not. But design-wise, conceptually, it's fairly simple. Let me explain, okay? You have a variety of monsters that can spawn, right? And each has a different attack style and a different pattern. Now, on any given wave, you just have to take the information of where the monsters spawn and what types of monsters they are. From there, you figure out what to pray at what time, right? You have to figure out where to place yourself, and you have to figure out the order to kill the monsters in. It starts out incredibly simple, right? Everybody can kill a bat, but it's this rolling wave of just higher and higher difficulties with more intricate solves and more complex patterns. It's an immeasurably high skill ceiling where players are still to this day pushing the limits of what is possible. And yet, the most basic strategies, while maybe hard to get an initial grasp on, are still engaging and interesting, right? It just takes a few well-oiled mechanics. And that's mainly what I think we've been lacking in our content recently. And I don't just mean TOA. I think a great example of this is Nex. It's probably one of the most hated bosses in the game, if not the most hated boss. But it's kind of hard to say explicitly why. If depth is what you're looking for, Nex has depth. There are tons of little things that you can do to make the fight more efficient and more engaging. Right, there's step unders, there's follow stalling, there's melee method, etc., etc. But you see, those high-end micro efficiencies are just addendums to the core basic mechanics. And the basic mechanics of Nex fucking suck. You go in with a crossbow, you sit there and you just auto attack and you take unavoidable chip damage. That's just so unfun, right? To be successful, a piece of content has to be fun from the moment that you step in, right? Even the most basic and easiest possible way has to be engaging. Otherwise, players are not going to want to start adding on more mechanics to make the fight more complex or efficient. And this is exactly the issue with not only Nex, but other fights in the game, right? Like the initial Nightmare, that sucks. Certain rooms of TOA, namely the monkey room. And that is what And that is what content like TOB does so extremely well. Instead of a multitude of mechanics that tend to be surface level, each room focuses on like 1 to 3 kind of core components that just have insanely high ceilings. All right, take Zarpus, for instance, right? Your first time doing Zarpus, you're probably gonna be blowpiping it. It's super basic. You're probably not gonna be moving efficiently. You might be ragging more tiles than you need to, but then you'll get comfortable. You start learning when to move without losing any ticks or ragging any extra tiles, just being more efficient because you've learned the patterns. Now you can melee, right? You start off with the 4-tick melee cycle. You become familiar with all the sound cues, the visual cues to help you fit into that cycle. And then you learn how to get back in that cycle when you mess up. And now you can learn the 5-tick melee cycle where you rag a tile on purpose and then use all those cues you learned to get right back into the correct cycle. And then after 5-ticking, you can learn back tiling, and Zarpus just at that point becomes mainly math, but you get the point. Zarpus is all about movement. That's it. But the way that you can interact with that movement, it becomes so complex and it becomes so interesting that it really is just a stellar fight. And that's why I think TOB is one of the best pieces of content in the game. Like, it's just repeated examples of that. And that's why players are so engaged with it and still doing it today. Like, no one like really burns out a TOB that much. You'll always go back. It's just good. And as I've thought more about TOA, my opinion has shifted. At first, I loved that it was easy, because I wanted every single player in the game to be able to do it. But then, as a result, the player base didn't grow. Our population didn't spike. No one new really came into the game, or at least very few people. And now guess what? As a result, all of the veterans who were looking for like a new TOB or a new Inferno, they kind of left disappointed. So maybe TOA wasn't what the game needed. Maybe it can be fixed by tweaking some invocations. You know, who knows? What do you guys think?